Our next guest is Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, a third-generation El Pasoan representing Texas's 16th district. She made history in 2019 as the first woman elected to this seat and the first of two Latinas from Texas to serve in Congress. She serves as vice chair on the Democratic Women's Caucus. My great colleague, Rafael Bernal, is going to be conducting this interview. Take it away, Rafael.
Thank you, Steve. Congresswoman Escobar, it's always great to talk to you. And as Steve mentioned, you and your comadre Silvia Garcia were the first two Latinas to represent Texas federally, which is crazy coming from such a Latino state. My question is, when did you know that was going to be you? When did you get that feeling for the first time?
Well, Rafael, first, it's so wonderful to see you, and thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation today. You know, I honestly never had aspirations to run for Congress. It was not something that I thought I wanted to do. It was not something I planned for. And it really wasn't until I had made that decision. And it was, during the Trump administration, and I felt that my community and our values were all under assault, where I felt really compelled to run for Congress and to come and work for and defend my community here in Washington, D.C. But it wasn't really until I actually made the decision to get into the race when a friend of mine, Cesar Blanco, who is our state senator, said, you'd be the first Latina if you win. You'd be the first Latina ever to serve in Congress from Texas. And I remember when he told me, I was really shocked and appalled, really, to be honest. I mean, we are an important component of the state. But it's not surprising, unfortunately, because it's very challenging for women, especially women of color, women from the middle class, women with kids, et cetera. There are a lot of barriers to women running for Congress. And so, unfortunately, while it was shocking, it was not all that surprising.
So you mentioned your community and the border in general. The border as a region has been beat upon emotionally, physically. We're coming up to the anniversary of that horrible massacre in your hometown in Paso. How do you get people in Washington to understand the border, to even understand that the border is an integral part of the country?
That is such an important question, and it's part of what drives much of the work that I do. In 2019, before the pandemic, I brought nearly 20% of Congress to El Paso on CODELs. My team was hosting CODELs nearly every other weekend in 2019. And the last CODEL in 2019 that we had was at the end of July, right before the August recess, the August district work period. And I'll never forget after what was a great CODEL, putting my colleagues, into cars that would take them to the airport on August 2nd. And then the next morning, August 3rd, was the day of the deadliest targeted attack against Latinos in modern American history in my community of El Paso, where 23 lives were lost and our community was just absolutely devastated. But bringing members of Congress to the community is important. I also spend a lot of time, talking to folks about the border. I was having a conversation last night with a Republican colleague about immigration and about the border. And he said, well, we've got to secure the border first. And I reminded him that we've been saying those same words, we've got to secure the border first, for decades. And hundreds of billions of dollars in, we've got to recognize that securing the border doesn't mean cruelty, it doesn't mean militarization, or it shouldn't. And that even those very kind of terrible public policy approaches have been a failure. And so it's constant conversations. It's bringing people in true fact-finding trips, because it's the trips that we have hosted are very diverse and holistic, very unlike the trips that many Republican colleagues take, where they use our community as a prop. I'm going to keep doing everything I can to tell the real story of the border.
So since we're on border management and immigration, I can't help but ask you, will you vote for a reconciliation package that doesn't include immigration provisions?
I don't want to assert yes or no yet. But I have made up my mind. I'm not ready to talk about that publicly. I have real concerns about a whole host of issues, whether we are going to address the climate crisis, whether we are going to preserve voter rights at the ballot box, and whether we will finally do our job as members of Congress and pass immigration legislation. And there's a lot on the line coming up in the next few weeks and the next few months before the end of the year. And I have a number of priorities. Immigration is definitely one of them. But I will tell you, Rafael, it is astonishing to me that the public continues to show support. In fact, support has grown in public polling for immigration reform and for a path to citizenship and opening up legal pathways. And yet we still have members of Congress acting as though the American public doesn't want this. We have to do something. This has to be the year. We cannot continue to punt on this critical issue.
Well, when you are ready to make that public, you know who to tell. We'll keep your secret till then. But I want to ask you one last question, and it's really about your community, about young Latinas along the border. Like, what do you want them to know as a role model for them about their possibilities of, going to Congress or going to space or doing whatever they want with their lives?
Oh my gosh, I just had this great conversation with my DC interns about this very issue. My DC interns, all of which are Latino. And I told them that so often we hold ourselves back because we're afraid of failure. We're afraid to disappoint our families, or we're afraid to disappoint ourselves. And for many young people of color, and I come to this as a Latina who felt this way growing up, there's a component of fear and self-doubt. And I have shared with them, the sky's the limit. And even if you try something and you don't achieve exactly what you wanted to, there are incredible lessons to be learned along the way. There's resilience to be built, character to be developed. And so I want all of our Latinas, all of our Latinos to be ambitious for themselves, to dream big and to go for it. It's why my internship program in Congress is important. On my campaign side, I have an internship program. I want our young people to know not only do they have a place in leadership, but we need their leadership.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this interview. I'd love to keep going. Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, it's always great to talk to you.
Likewise, thank you.
Right, back to the studio.